They say, if someone can replace you, they were never yours. But what they don't say is how quickly the heart can feel erased. One new friend, one new colleague, one new name mentioned too often. Why does your chest tighten at the smallest shift? Why does connection feel like a seat that can be taken? This is a silent fear few admit. Let's begin. It rarely begins with drama. It begins with a name. Someone mentions a new friend, a new colleague, a new person who now shares the space you once held so naturally. The tone is casual. The story is ordinary. Nothing has been taken from you. And yet, something inside you shifts, a quiet tightening. Your chest feels smaller. Your thoughts move faster. You notice yourself listening differently, not to the story, but to what it might mean. Are they closer now? Are you fading? The mind does not shout these questions. It whispers them, and the body responds before logic can intervene. You begin comparing without wanting to. Their qualities, their energy, their presence. You replay conversations, searching for signs you missed. Did the distance start earlier? Was there a moment when you could have been more interesting, more supportive, more unforgettable? From the outside, it might look like insecurity, but inside, it feels like erosion, as if the ground beneath your sense of belonging has shifted slightly, not enough to collapse, but enough to make you aware of gravity. This is not vanity. It's the fear of becoming invisible, in a space where you once felt seen, and that fear does not live in the ego. It lives in the nervous system, in the part of you that equates closeness with safety. When someone new steps in, it can feel less like addition and more like substitution. Not because you are replaceable, but because something inside you learned long ago that attention could move. And when it did, it meant something. Long before you worried about being replaced, you learned what it meant to be chosen. In some homes, attention was steady, like a lamp that stayed on through the night. In others, it flickered. Affection arrived warmly, but not always predictably. Praise felt bright, but brief. Sometimes it shifted toward a sibling, sometimes toward a guest, sometimes toward whoever needed less. You may not remember exact sentences, but you remember the feeling, the subtle comparison, the quiet competition, the moment someone else was celebrated while you adjusted your smile. No one had to say, you are replaceable. It was learned in glances, in who was called first, in who was comforted longer, in how quickly attention could move. And when attention moves often enough, the nervous system adapts. It begins to monitor, to anticipate shifts, to measure its worth by proximity. You might have tried to be easier, brighter, less demanding, more impressive, anything to secure your place in the emotional landscape. Not because you were selfish, but because belonging felt conditional. If love seemed tied to performance, if closeness depended on staying exceptional, then the possibility of being replaced does not feel irrational. It feels historical. The adult world may offer different relationships, healthier ones, more stable ones, but the body remembers the old instability. So when someone new appears, it does not see an addition, it sees a pattern, and patterns, once carved deeply enough, feel like truth. Belonging is not a luxury. It is a survival system. Long before modern life, being excluded from the group meant danger. Isolation meant vulnerability. The human nervous system evolved with this truth carved into it, and the brain never fully forgot. Neuroscience shows that social rejection activates many of the same regions involved in physical pain. The sting of exclusion is not metaphorical. It is biological when someone pulls away, when attention shifts, when your place feels uncertain. The brain does not calmly analyze it as a minor change. It scans for threat. Is the bond weakening? Is safety decreasing? Even subtle social shifts, a new friend, a changed tone, a different priority, can register like a small alarm. Not because you are dramatic, but because your nervous system is wired to protect connection. The mind tries to interpret the signal. It looks for evidence. It prepares for loss before it happens. Because anticipating pain can feel safer than being surprised by it. This is why the feeling of being replaced can feel disproportionate to the situation. You are not reacting to one moment. You are reacting to the possibility of exclusion, a possibility your brain treats as serious. The intensity is not proof that you are weak. It is proof that belonging matters to you and to the brain. Anything that threatens belonging feels like standing at the edge of something ancient. When someone new enters the picture, the mind begins measuring, not loudly, not proudly, quietly. You notice their strengths first, their humor, their confidence, their ease. And without choosing to, you begin adjusting your internal scale. Are they more interesting, more effortless, more needed? The comparison does not feel malicious. It feels protective. If you can identify where you fall short, perhaps you can correct it, improve it, compete quietly for your place. So the inner dialogue begins. You should have been more supportive. You should have been less emotional. You should have been more impressive. The mind starts rewriting who you are in subtle ways. Enthusiasm becomes restrained. Opinions become softened. Vulnerability becomes filtered because somewhere beneath the comparison lies a single fear: not being enough to stay. You begin to measure your worth by visibility, by how often you are mentioned, by how quickly you are responded to. The heart becomes a scoreboard, but connection is not a competition. And yet the nervous system treats it like one. It assumes scarcity, as if attention can only be held by one person at a time, as if value disappears when it is shared, and so you shrink slightly, not because you lack depth, but because you are trying to avoid the pain of losing your place. The inner comparison machine does not want superiority, it wants security, and in its attempt to protect you, it quietly turns you against yourself. The fear says, they found someone better, but connection does not operate like spare parts. Human relationships are not interchangeable components on a machine. One person does not simply slide out so another can slide in. Identical in function, identical in meaning, and yet, when attention shifts, it can feel exactly like that. Someone laughs more with another person, shares more stories, spends more time, and the mind translates this into subtraction. If they are gaining something, you must be losing something. But attention is not a fixed container. It is a moving current. It flows in seasons. It expands and contracts depending on context, proximity, and life stage. The myth of replaceability grows from the belief that value is scarce, that if someone else is appreciated, your worth has been diluted. But worth does not dilute. A friend can build a new bond without erasing an old one. A partner can connect deeply with another human without rewriting your significance. Attention shifting is not the same as value disappearing. One is movement. The other is interpretation. The illusion forms when movement is mistaken for rejection, when a new presence is mistaken for substitution, but every connection carries a unique imprint shaped by shared history, private jokes, difficult conversations, and silent understandings. No one can replicate that exact pattern, not because you are superior, but because you are specific, and specificity is not replaceable. At some point, the exhaustion becomes visible, the constant measuring, the quiet shrinking, the rehearsing of worth, and something in you begins to soften. What if this feeling is not proof that you are lacking? What if it is a younger part of you asking, am I still safe here? Feeling replaceable is rarely about arrogance or pride. It is often an attachment wound seeking reassurance. A part of you that once equated attention with stability is scanning for signs that the bond still holds. When you turn inward with awareness instead of criticism, the comparison begins to loosen. Instead of asking, what do they have that I don't? A different question appears. Why does this feel so threatening? The shift is subtle. You begin noticing the tightening in your chest without labeling it as weakness. You observe the impulse to compete without obeying it. The fear becomes information. It tells you where you long for security, where you crave reassurance, where old instability still echoes beneath present relationships. And in that noticing, something steadies. You no longer have to fight yourself to stay connected. You can hold the fear gently, not as an enemy, but as a signal of how deeply you care about belonging. And care, when met with compassion instead of judgment, becomes grounding rather than destabilizing. There is a quiet shift that happens when you stop asking, am I still chosen? And begin asking, am I still choosing myself? For so long, your sense of security may have rested in other people's hands, in their replies, their invitations, their visible affection. When attention felt steady, you felt steady. When it wavered, so did you. But there is another kind of belonging, an internal one, the kind that does not depend on being the favorite, or the most impressive, or the most needed. It depends on something quieter, self-trust, the ability to remain with yourself even when attention shifts around you. Becoming irreplaceable to yourself does not mean becoming indifferent. You still care. You still value connection, but your worth no longer trembles every time someone else's focus moves. You recognize that your presence carries its own imprint. Your humor, your history, your way of understanding the world. These are not commodities in competition. They are expressions of a singular life. And when you anchor there, comparison loosens its grip. If parts of this reflection felt familiar, if something quiet inside you recognized the tightening described here, you are not alone in that experience. Many carry this fear silently. If you'd like to stay connected to a space where these hidden patterns are explored gently, where attachment, insecurity, and belonging are understood without shame, you are welcome here. And if you feel comfortable, you can share your thoughts below, not because you must, but because sometimes your honesty becomes someone else's reassurance that they are not the only one who has ever felt replaceable.